second chapter of the book of Joshua. And I titled it The Start of the Campaign to in Jericho. This idea is that with just a quick read, you're probably not going to pull much out of the second chapter, but the second chapter is very important to understand some of the hidden context within words. I went through and began to score over commentary and to find out what does the Midrash and Talmudic sources, et cetera, say that are not in the actual text, right? What are they saying? First of all, in the second chapter, it starts off saying this: and Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men out of Shittim to spy secretly, saying, go see the land and Jericho. And they went and came to the house of an innkeeper named Rahav, and they lay there. Now, there are hidden words within this, and this is what is kind of fun about Torah. There are hidden words that point to something else. Notice there is no mention of who the 2 spies were. No mention of it. I'm not really sure why they decided to leave it out, except for the fact that Joshua, Pinchas, and Caleb all were contributors to the book of Joshua. Okay, this is pretty much common knowledge. Why? Because Joshua was responsible as the de facto now leader of the nation to record its history, to record the laws. And the Ark of the Covenant was the repository of the laws of God. And so with that being said, every king had to maintain a public record. And we're going to point out some things. For example, when they wrote this document, it was automatically assumed everybody knew who Joshua sent. It's not in the text, but there's some hints to it, okay? So the 2 men out of Shittim to spy secretly, saying, go see the land and Jericho. Why send them out from Shittim? The first group of spies that we saw in text were the 12 spies sent from each tribe. And the 12 tribes followed a very long distance because of where they were at the time in the desert to make it into Canaan. And 10 of the 12 spies went and saw a horrible reality that they didn't want to face. As a matter of fact, in the text for the 12 spies, Moshe says to go out and tell me if there are any trees. This was not about actually finding trees. Anybody knows any land has trees. What trees meant was the land ripe with potential converts and ger toshav. Were there righteous, being the tree of life? Did they exude some level of morality and holiness that would say these people are potential candidates for joining the people of Israel? And of course, the 10 men came in and said, no, there isn't any. And the ones we did see, they were giants. They were strong, meaning stubborn. Now, Joshua and Caleb knew the difference, according to the Midrash. They, as a matter of fact, part of their argument was that's not what we saw. There are people there that are truly pure and righteous. But obviously they were voted down. So this time, it says in the Midrash that Joshua secretly, and the whole term secretly, plays into 2 things. Number one, Moshe was still being mourned at this time, right? So Joshua didn't want to disturb the people of Israel with this whole idea, I'm now sending spies into the next city that we're going to potentially invade. We just go keep it on the low, keep it secret. And he sends 2 of the most trustworthy men that he knows. And this is the deal. These are known spies. These are strong people. One, Caleb, was a spy already, and he understood how to get around and move as a spy. The other one was Pinchas. Now, Pinchas was not a previous spy, but Pinchas was very decisive and very strong about the protection of Torah. And so Joshua felt that if I send these two men in, they are going to give us a proper record ordering of what the area is like. It says, and they went and came to the house an innkeeper named Rahav. The reason why he sent them from Shittim, he said to them, according to Midrash, go to the river and then go follow it down until you can cross over into Canaan, where it doesn't look like you came from Shittim. Because Shittim was an occupied territory at that point, right? Two tribes were occupying that area. And so they were to go into into Jericho, and they were to be as secretive as possible. When we say secretive, we all know spies are spies, and it's very common for a king to send spies. And it's interesting, just like any spy organization, you're not going to send one by himself. You're going to send a couple. One needs to have the other's back, a partner program. And Pinchas and Caleb were a team made in heaven, right? Two of the best men that he could send. And it said that when they got there, something happened within this chapter that we go, wait, you mean they leave, they go, and the next thing we know, in verse 2, okay, we're not even out of the chapter, but verse 2, it says, and it was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men have come here this night from the children of Israel to search the land. Now, here's the fupa. Within the text, my little strategic military mind started going. And I'm thinking, what happened to these two spies that when they arrived in the city, everybody knew who they were? I mean, if you're trying to spy out the land, that is not very clever that now the king of the land knows that you're there. Okay, so what happened? There are several comments in the Midrash that says that Joshua and Caleb so radiated a level of holiness and righteousness that everyone figured it out. That's number one. Number two, there were certain individuals who kind of milled around the community and understood. Rahab, her house was an inn. It wasn't like a cat house in the back of Louisiana somewhere. It was like a hotel. And all the tourists would come in and stop there. They would eat, drink, be merry, have a great time. You could sleep on the roof, do whatever, have a good time. Joshua and Caleb figure, well, this woman, Rahab, if she's a prostitute, then she's going to know stuff on everybody. It said that she was so beautiful that if a man were to mention her name twice, it would be irresistible to have a relationship with her. And according to Midrash, she had the relationship with many kings in the region who would come there and lay with her and tell her secrets, et cetera, et cetera. So this was their reason for going to Rahab's house. But here was the big mistake. Do you want to hear the big mistake? They showed up at night. If they'd have showed up in the middle of the day with wares, like they're travelers, or with pots, as one Midrash says that Joshua said to take with you, instruments of pottery, look like that you're doing a, sales job. But no, they slide in at night to her inn. And so suspicion is immediate with these guys. Well, when she finds out, it says in verse 3, it says, the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring forth the men who have come to you that have entered your house, for they have come to search out the entire land. Now, let's go back to this key phrase in verse 1. It says, go see the land and Jericho. Is that redundancy necessary? And I would say there is no accidents in Torah text. In this particular period of time, it was more like city states. Does that make sense? City nations. It was nations were cities. And the land around it, for whatever reason, was important to scope it out. Now, the art, or what do you call spycraft, not only requires you to be stealthy, but intelligent also to know what you need to look for in whether they have a strong army, whether they have a lot of wealth, what's their agriculture like, what's their center core of their, what do you call it, national product, what do they sell, what do they do to make money, and is it worth even invading? I mean, the whole point of sending a spy is to say, if it's not worth it, if they don't have much value, let's just move past them and go to another place. Or do they have a strong fortress, and how do we defeat it? It was interesting in the commentaries. It talks about how the nation of Israel, though God said that he would always be with them and he would help them win their battles, they absolutely still had the obligation to fully prepare the battle as if they were getting no divine assistance. And I find it interesting that we'll come back and visit that topic at the end of our discussion, but know, like, you're supposed to prepare like you don't have divine assistance and you're not going to get the help. And so you need to fight wars smart. So it's not like, oh, we don't have to do any preparation, God will take care of it. So that's an important part to find out. How do we get divine intervention? Well, divine intervention comes to those people who do the proper preparation for divine intervention to come in, right? You have to be worthy of the divine intervention. So he says, go see the land and Jericho. So what he's meaning is, if you get to the city, because any major city that has a fortress, it's going to determine how the land is. If within the city walls, there's plenty of wealth, there's security, blah, 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 then you can pretty much know the land layout, people are doing well, and it would be worth the fight. So that's why go see the land and Jericho. Next thing, the king finds out they're there, and the cat's out of the bag. It says, now the woman had taken the two men and had hidden them. And she said, indeed, the men came to me, but I don't know from where they were. So she's feigning ignorance of the whole thing. And she had brought them up to the roof, and she hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid arranged on the roof. The men pursued them in the direction of Jordan to fords, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, they shut the gate. And before they were asleep, she came up to them upon the roof, and she said to them, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away because of you. Now, you got to remember that when they left the land of Israel, they caused fear and loathing and trembling in Canaan. And I find it interesting, in this parsha begins at a very historical, our study of Joshua begins at one of the most historical archaeological finds in the state of Israel. And it is a fortress that dates back to 500 BCE. It was an Egyptian fortress in cooperation with the Canaanites. They set this massive fort up in southern Israel to keep the Israelites from invading that part of Canaan. So how fearful were they? Very fearful. And I'm not so sure that it was because of the military prowess of the Israelites as much as the news of their wins and how they win these battles. It's like, in their mind, as she says, I know that God has given you the land. How did she know that? And that your terror is falling upon us. So obviously, over the last few months, the word was getting around through Canaan that the Israelites are marching this direction. and they're a formidable people, and we've got to guard ourselves. It seems like the city was well guarded. It seemed that the king had a good spy network that is actually written down in the text. And it said in verse 11, verse 10, he says, she said, we've heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings, the Amorites, that were there on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you completely destroyed. You got to realize Sihon and Og were like two of the most decorated, powerful leaders of their people, and monstrously big. And it's like, if you were able to beat them, we don't want to mess with you. Verse 11, and as soon as we heard, our hearts melted. This is how they got the news, is at that first battle. Nor did there remain any more spirit in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven and above and below the earth. So she's making a declaration of one God. Verse 12, and now I pray, swear to me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that you will also show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token. So she's saying, look, by the way, I failed to mention this. The Midrash says that Rachav was, she was a very kind and generous woman. And this is the reason why that they showed up at the hotel. It appears that these two spies, by the time they got there, had some intel that we don't have right now. Like, how did they know she was a kind and generous woman? They knew she was a prostitute. That was part of their cover. I don't know if you realize that. Part of their cover was they would never suspect Israelite men to go to a prostitute. So we go sleep at the prostitute's house, no one will suspect that. Well, the problem is the word got out before they could even, take a nap that night. So their goal was to go in to not say anything, almost to act like they're mute or deaf, and to try to go there and just hang out and listen to what people say. But we're talking about as soon as they got there, they were figured out. So she gives them a way out. Verse 14, it says, the men answered her, our lives are our lives for yours. If you will not tell this our discussions, and it will be when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal with you with kindness and truth. Now, I paused at this. Honestly, guys, I'm not sure why the word truth is in there. I've ruminated over it, and I'm just not. There has got to be a reason why it says kindness and truth. And I want to bring that up. If you guys have notes, just take a note so that we can discuss this in a little bit. And she let them down by a rope through the window of her house, was in the town wall, and she dwelt in the wall. It is also by the rope and the window that people would ascend to her if they didn't want to be seen going through the front doors. And it seems, according to Rashi, that this is some tshuva for her, because she says, "O Lord of the universe, with these I have sinned, these ropes, I have sinned. With these also, forgive me." So it's almost like a repairing, like I've used these ropes for bringing people in for prostitution. I'm now going to use these ropes to protect your people, your spies, and may you have mercy on me. She said to them, go to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourself there 3 days until the pursuers return, and after you'll go away. And the men said to her, we will be blameless of this your oath which you made us swear. Blameless, making the matter dependent upon, we're making this matter dependent upon you making this sign. So she had to provide a sign for them. And it says, behold, when you are in the land, you shall bind this line of scarlet thread in the window by which you let us down, and you shall bring your father and your mother and your brothers and all in the household. And basically it says anybody that is outside of your household, we are not responsible for. We cannot guarantee that there won't be collateral damage in the invasion if they're not in your house. So your house is your safety. And if you tell this our discussion, then will we be blameless of your oath which you have made us swear. And he said, according to your word, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet line in the window. And they went and came to the mountain, saying there 3 days until the pursuers returned. And the pursuers sought them throughout all the way, but they did not find them. The two men returned and descended from the mountain and crossed over and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him all that had happened. They said to Joshua, verse 24, which is the last verse of this chapter, for the Lord has delivered into our hands all the land. Also, the inhabitants of the country have melted away because of us. First question that I have. Why send 2 spies when 12 spies couldn't do it? Right? So we're going to have some more questions that we got to start asking, and we're going to use this as part of the discussion on this chapter. I'll answer that question with this comment. The 12 spies were representatives of their tribes. They were representing their tribes, and they're thinking, I know my tribes, that's my family. I'm not going to put them through this. This is too dangerous for them. And they weren't looking for the right reason. I don't know if you realize this, but Joshua and Caleb were sent in as spies, but they were given a specific mission to go to a certain part of the land, right? To go to the cave of Machpelah. They're supposed to be looking at its spiritual essence and what it had to report back, and they were successful. The other men just went to go see, actually they saw it through their ego and their carnal eyes. They didn't see that God was giving them anything. And it has to be emphasized that Joshua sending 2 spies into Jericho was not a lack of emunah, not a lack of faith. What was it? It was being a very smart military man and king. It's just, you've got to know what you're getting yourself into. It's not a lack of faith for Joshua to do that. So that was the reason why he sent the spies into the land.